we have action, hopefully. Welcome to 3D Foundations. Hopefully you guys are excited about today. Are we excited about today or? Yeah. Okay, good, because that's hell yeah, thank you for playing. Most of you came here, this is the class you were looking forward to, so I'm really excited to teach the material to you. I know you have a ton of questions. Hopefully I have a bunch of answers, but we have a very narrow amount of time and lots to talk about. So what I like to do is I'm gonna try to answer your questions as we go. And I would like you to kind of channel your questions to what I'm actually talking about at the time. That way we get through everything we need to get through. And then at the end, with all the time we've earned, then we can go into the random stuff all over the place. Does that make sense? Because I love to go on tangents, and if you start sending me down one of those paths, I will follow it all the way. So, and then we'll never get through the material. So we got to get through all this stuff we got to talk about today, because today is probably one of the most critical days of the class. What the heck is going on? And we got to be dialed in and ready to go as of this class. So very important that we understand what's going on. So without much ado, let's get into the magical slides of joy. And hopefully, again, answering the multitude of questions that you have around what the heck are we doing this month? All right, so first question you probably have is who are you going to be working with? Now, there's a bunch of characters that help out with this class. One of the primary guys is Marcus. He's going to be one of the instructors in the lab environment. We're going to talk more about it, but we have two environments. We have a lecture environment. We have a lab environment. Lecture is where I talk, you write and ask questions and do little exercises. Lab is where you get more one-on-one time and extremely valuable help from a live person. Does that make sense? If you're in my local class. If you're in my digital class, right after lecture, we have sessions for you to get some help. And that's on Saturdays and on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, we'll talk more about that, but the schedule's on FSL. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, or on Wednesdays and Fridays, you'll have special sessions for just you where Brian, the other course director of the class, will be available for one-on-one help. And believe you me, you will need help in this class. I guarantee it. I don't care where you're coming from and what you got experience-wise, you're gonna want the help. And believe me, there's a ton of it out there. I just wish more of you would tap into it because it will make a difference. And your better bet is to go heavy early with asking for help and needing help, and then realize, yeah, you know what, I think I got this. Then to go, you know what, I'll get it. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to make a noise. You know, if I tell them I don't know what I'm doing, they'll giggle, right? This is a beginner's class. I expect you to be beginners, but you need to admit when you need help and go get it immediately, because the material, it's kind of like a snowball, and if you let it, it will crush you. Does that make sense? I don't want that to happen, so I'm letting you know up front. If you even think you need some help, go get it. It's easy and it's fun. And it's social, which you guys are totally down with, right? Cool, I thought so. All right, so this is Marcus. He's one of the instructors in the lab environment. When we started up this class and we kind of created this curriculum, I asked everybody to make a Lego person of themselves. So this is what Marcus thinks he looks like if he was a Lego person. So see if you can pick him out in the lab. And I had him put down a couple of his interests in terms of some things that he feels is interesting for you to know about him. So feel free to talk to him about any and all of those things. But you will notice one of the things here that we're talking about, areas of specialty: modeling, texturing, lighting, and rendering. Those are all jobs on the CG production pipeline. How many of you guys have ever heard of the CG production pipeline? No, just one or two? Okay, that's good. And that's fine because, again, this is a beginner's class. I teach it like you know absolutely nothing. Does that make sense? So that's not a bad thing. All right, so CG production pipeline. It is very similar to an automotive assembly line. At one end, we have the empty frame of a car. At the other end, we have a car we can drive. And what happens is that car moves through the factory and it stops at a series of stations. Each station that the car stops at, there is a job of specialty being performed there. For example, perhaps I install doors. So the car comes to me, I put a door on that car, it goes off. The next car comes in, I put a door on the next one. So I do one thing, I do it really well, and I do it really quickly. Does that make sense? Specialization. Disciplines on the CG production pipeline, very much the same thing. Over here, I've got an idea. Over here, I've got a movie or a video game I can play or watch. Does that make sense? So the different disciplines that you can do, this is a modeling class. So we're talking about that one. Make sense? Okay. On to Sarah. Yes, we have a girl too. So Sarah will also be in the lab, although not this week. She's off this week, but she'll be back for the remaining weeks. And this is what she thinks she would look like as a Lego person. Obviously a cat-driven individual, so feel free to ask about her cat. She'll talk your ears off about that. And again, if you look at her areas of specialty, not only does she do modeling, but she does rigging, which is a very complementary skill because we're talking about building the machine that enables you to animate something. So that's a very cool skill. And modeling, an odd combination. Typically, animators don't also model, but she does. So a unique individual to bring to the team. And Brian, who you can't see, he's kind of the man behind the curtain over there. He's going to get me a Lego man once his arm grows back, because right now it's damaged. And once he grows a new one, he'll be fine. Yeah, just like Groot. All right. So, and that, you'd probably guess that was me. And again, feel free to ask me or heckle me about anything that's on my list. Next question, you're probably wondering, what are we going to be doing this month? What are we doing? We are going to be building assets or objects that are in the world around us. Much like when you're first learning to draw, we start with still life because you have to own reality before you can make plausible fantasy, right? You have to train your eye to see and recreate faithfully, without interpretation, detail. Does that make sense? So just like we start with still life, we're going to model everyday objects. And then that will help you develop the skills that you need to build these objects and then go on to building more elaborate and exciting things like X-Wings. But it starts with simple stuff. Ultimately, after we've built a whole bunch of objects, what we're going to do is have a final scene, and it is a still life. We're going to render out a final image of the objects that you've built over the span of the month. And it's kind of showing off what you accomplished this month. And that thing could be printed out. You can send it to your mom and she can put it on the refrigerator, or you can, post it to a website or something like that, whatever you want to do with it, and show everybody what you accomplished in just 1 month, which is no small feat, I might add. All right, in terms of the object you guys are building, there are 3 different levels of complexity. We have our beginner level, the minion level assets, level 1, easier to build, less complex objects. Then we have our level 2, our boss level assets. And then when we get to level 3, it's Supreme Poly Commander. And these are the more complex objects that you're going to be building. And we kind of move you through a progression so that you start with the easier things and move your way into the more complex. And then ultimately, when you reach the end, one of your level 3 objects could be your own Lego person. So you get the opportunity to build your own little person. And we had a student, I thought was that 4 months ago? 3 months ago, 4 months ago, we had a student who, as soon as his friends found out that he was going to be building a Lego person, they're like, oh, you're going to build me one. And then he had to build like 4 or 5 of them for several of his friends, which I thought was pretty cool. They all wanted one. Yes. Boop. You can also build some totally cool accessories to go with your Lego person, because you can't have Lego people without boss accessories, right? So that is on top. But more to the point of your question, we are not building organic. We are building objects from the world around us. We start with hard surface, what they call hard surface, meaning inanimate things. Some of them do change shape, which we do term organic in terms of the change in shape of the geometry, because things bend and move sometimes, although not living. Does that make sense? All right, so let's talk about grading, because everyone wants a good grade. Who wants a good grade in here? Just me? Okay. Good for you. That's even better. Actually, the best question is, who wants a job? Okay, good. All right, because honestly, there's a big difference that most people don't realize. There's a tremendous difference between, I want to pass this class, I want a good grade in this class, and I want an opportunity to be able to get a job. Those are 2 totally different animals. You don't want to pass. You don't want the best grade in the class. You want an opportunity to get a job. Does that make sense? That's the goal. So bear that in mind. All right, so let's talk a little bit about grading though, because this is how we assess your abilities, and this is how you assess your abilities in comparison with your peers. So we do need to evaluate. Now, if you look at the things that we are grading on, okay, there's different criteria. We have technical criteria, we have organizational criteria, and we have artistic criteria. All right, artistic criteria accounts for 34% of the grade on any given object that we are grading. All right, artistic criteria, does it look right? Does that make sense? If I look at the file and I know what it is you built and it looks just like the real thing, that's a 100% of the artistic criteria. Does that make sense? That only earns you a 34. Can you pass with a 34? No, you cannot. So equally important to does it look right? We also have technical and organizational requirements that you must adhere to. Does that make sense? So what you have to realize is just because it looks good does not mean you're done. There are other things you have to do. On the positive side, what that means is if you are new to all of this and your skills are just developing, you're not penalized for not having things that look exactly like the real thing. Always go for the just like the real thing, but realize that there are other places that you can earn points that are equally important. Does that make sense? So make sure you're paying attention to the organizational and technical requirements. Now, in terms of those requirements, I've actually made a document for you guys, and it's called the self-grade document. And literally, that's what it is. You can grade yourself. Before you even turn your work in, I've got a list for you of things to do. Brush your teeth, wash your face, comb your hair, let the dog out. They're very yes, no. If you did them, you get all the points. If you didn't do them, you miss the points for the things you didn't do. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I ask you to make 4 things and you made 3 of them, you just got a 75. Does that make sense? Do everything on the list, you're going to do great. Ignore the list, you're not going to do as well as you're thinking. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, FSO, and Brian was mentioning this earlier, FSO is a list of everything you need to know about this class, all the materials you need for this class, all on FSO. So where do you think that self-grade document is? On FSO, absolutely. To that point, before I forget it and skip over it, look over FSO. Read everything I gave you. They don't pay me by the activity or by the download. Okay, I make the same money. Doesn't make any difference. If I put it in there, you need it. There are no gimmies on there. Does that make sense? Just because there's not, an assignment to do for it, you just check it off that says you've done it. That doesn't mean you just check it off and you're done. Read through it, right? We're playing a game. The rules of this game are on FSO. You would not play a game if you didn't know the rules to the game. Does that make sense? Other players will take advantage of you, so don't do that. Make sure you know what's going on. Make sense? Okay, so always go to FSO first. There's a lot of answers there, so please utilize that resource. It's got a ton, and it's always there for you. If you've got internet, you're golden. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. Well, that's a pretty good hell yeah for day 1. Normally it takes a little while to work our way up to that one. Any questions on this grading criteria? Just want to make sure you understand that, okay? Is it beautiful? It's only 34%. So make sure you're following the other stuff. All right, class structure. I talked a little bit about this idea that we have a lecture environment and we have a lab environment. Right now we're in the lecture environment. After this, if you're in my local class, we will go to the lab environment. Now, very important element about this month in particular. We will be doing, and this doesn't affect my digital friends at all, you guys, this is where you live. But in terms of my local class, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we meet in this room at this time. Make sense? That's when we do lecture. Immediately after, we do lab, right? Lab is 6 hours long. So we're all together for 2 hours in here and then 6 hours of lab. You're gonna need every minute of that lab to get the work done. Does that make sense? Difference, on Saturday, we start earlier, all right? The good news is though, it's online. So you don't have to get out of bed. You can just stay in your bed in your jammies and have Pop-Tarts, sign on with your computer just like I did a second ago and watch the lecture. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a little TV show, and this is how my onliners learn every day. So it's not gonna affect you guys in the least. other than it will be at a different time. Lecture will be going from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Lab will immediately follow 6 hours after that, and then you're done for the day. We're not up all night. Does that make sense? You actually have a chance to get some work done. I'm a get started early and have time to work and then relax, rather than, you know, goof off a bit the early part of the day and then struggle with the late evening. Does that make sense? Okay, so just realize on Saturdays, it's a virtual classroom, just like you guys always see, but it's at a different time. 8 to 10 for lecture, and then from 10 to 4 will be the lab. Does that make sense? And again, you don't have to go to the lab physically. You'll just stay signed in like this, and there'll be professors there online to help you answer your questions, do one-on-ones with you, so you can get the help you need. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah on that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So, and it does take attendance, so you got to be there. All right, lecture environment. Let's talk about the lecture. In the lecture, we are going to talk about different tools, different strategies, techniques. How do I do this? How do I do that? And really the best thing you can do during the lecture time, whether it's digital or analog, is listen closely and take notes. Write stuff down and ask me questions. Critically important, because when it comes to 3D, if you are missing a step, it doesn't work. Does that make sense? It's not something you can go, it's close enough, you know, 6 feet, 7 feet, let's do 6.5. It just doesn't work like that. You have to have every single step and every little setting exactly right, or it does not work. Does that make sense? There's no close enough. There's yes or no. So if you have a notebook and you write stuff down, you own that information. I have said it a million times. When you're just listening, you're renting the information. When you write it down, you own the information. Does that make sense? You want to own it. It's yours. So make sure you've got that. And to that end, I still look at notebooks that I had when I was in college learning this stuff. So believe me, you need that information. There's just too much to learn. You will never learn it all. And that's not a challenge. There's a lot to know about this. I've been working with Maya for about 15 years now, and I still learn something new every time I get on the application. So if you think you're gonna own it in a month, you're out of your mind. Does that make sense? So just be aware that the rabbit hole goes very deep. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. You ask Brian, I'm not a scary guy, but I will tell you the truth as I perceive it. Does that make sense? Because I don't want you guys to fall into the same pitfalls that someone else has fallen into. I don't want you to make the mistakes that others have made. I'm trying to save you from that stuff by letting you know up front. Does that make sense? Hell yeah?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. So take notes. Oh, also, and what I love about notebooks is you can draw pictures. So like if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, just write down the terms so that you can kind of learn those and draw pictures of what you see, because I'm a visual guy. You know, my notebook has got pictures all over it. It's so much easier when you can look at a picture and kind of, oh yeah, okay, that'll trigger some recall and it'll help you out tremendously. You can take notes on your laptop if you want to, but I've noticed that tends to be very shorthand, sort of bullet point, you miss stuff and you can't draw. So that's kind of frustrating. So I recommend paper. Oh, also notebooks never run out of power. You know, oh, my laptop's dead. Not good. As far as I know, notebooks are good until there's a fire. So notebooks are my favorite by far. Now, the good news is it's not all listening to me talk and writing stuff down. We actually have activities that we do in the classroom together. So what happens is I will introduce a topic. We will talk about it at length. You will write down the pertinent information, and then we do a little activity right after. And what happens is if you listen to me and you understood what we talked about using your notes, you should be able to do the activity. If I go, okay, guys, now we're going to do the activity, and you're like, I don't know where to start. I'm not sure what happens first. Your process for learning is not working. Whatever method you're using is not effective. You need to change gears. Does that make sense? And that's why I let you know up front. Just write stuff down. It's so much easier if you do. I think it was 2 months ago, I had a student who took the class, failed, took the class a second time, And one day she looked at me and she goes, you know, taking notes really makes this so much easier. I was like, I told you that the first day. Why did you wait till you had to take the class again to figure it out? You know, please. I'm advising you. I have your best interest at heart. I want you guys to do great, all of you. So believe me when I tell you, that's the way to go. But anyway, these activities help out tremendously because they tell you and me that you get what we just talked about. And then we go into more information and then we do another activity. Does that make sense? Okay, so at the end of the day, we've done a couple of activities. We've gone through a couple of different things that we want to learn and know. And then that culminates in what we call a skill check. So there will be a skill check for every day. And again, the skill check represents pretty much everything we talked about that day. So I give you an assignment to work on, which you will do in the lab. And that assignment encompasses what we talked about today. So if you can do the skill check, you understand what we talked about today and you're ready for the next lecture. If you can't do the skill check, you need to learn that stuff before we get to the next lecture. Does that make sense? That's what they're designed for. They're kind of like mini tests. Do I know what the heck's going on? Make sense? What's great about these skill checks, not only do they confirm you know what you're doing and you're keeping pace with your peers, they also are worth 1% of your grade, which means if you do all 10 of them, you up your letter grade by 1. So if you score out a B in the class and you did all 10 of these skill checks, you just got an A. Does that make sense? It's an easy full letter grade increase. So, I mean, if the testing part isn't good enough for you, how about an upgrade of 1 letter on your final grade? So they are way worth to do. So please do them. They're not hard, but they are important. Does that make sense? Any questions on the skill check idea? We pretty good on that? Okay, now for those of you who are worried, are we gonna have activities today because I don't have Maya? We do have activities, but today's the one and only day. You won't get in any trouble if you don't have Maya. But by Thursday, you've gotta have it. Does that make sense? Okay, so in terms of getting Maya, where do you think that is? It's on FSO. We've got links for you to click on it, download it, install it, get it functional. Again, we've got stuff for you to download for the class. I've got materials for you to set up, like installing Google Chrome as your web browser so that you can utilize the help sessions. There's a bunch of stuff for you to do. Now, the good news is, again, you don't have to have all that done by right now. It's good if you did, you know, hey, nice job if you did that already. But you can get away with it for today. But when you get to lab, which immediately follows lecture, you make sure you pour over FSO and do everything that's in there. That way you'll be ready for the next one. Does that make sense? Okay, and we got instructors in that lab to make sure you understand what you're doing. We'll get things set up. We'll make sure you've downloaded all the things you need to download. You will be ready to go for next time. Does that make sense? But hats off for anybody who figured it out in advance. Good for you. Being self-reliant is an amazing thing. Yes?
My question is the software indefinite or is it on a subscription?
No, the license that we are being offered is, I believe it's 2 years, 2 years or 3 years. Is it 3? Which is pretty awesome, to be honest with you. Getting a $7,000 application for free for 3 years is pretty cool. So I'm very excited that they were willing to do that for us, because that didn't used to be the case. They were not cool with that at all in the past, but it's been sweet since then.
Are we allowed to use the Maya that we're given for personal work, or can we only use it for school?
That's a good question. I would keep it to schoolwork. If you're trying to figure out where do I draw the line, as soon as you're making money on it, you've gone over the line. Does that make sense? They're giving it to you in good faith for free to learn and grow. If you are earning any money from it, you have violated that trust and subject to the laws that apply. Does that make sense?
So anything you do, you can still use it for your portfolio.
Absolutely, absolutely.
If you use it for your personal work, you can't sell it.
Exactly.
If you make any money with it, then you're breaking the law.
Yep. Yep. If you go, hey, I can model that monkey for you for $50, you know, no, all right, you've gone over the line. Does that make sense? You can't earn from it, but that's okay.
Oh, no, using Maya as a contract.
Oh, okay. No worries.
You will get sued.
Yes, you don't want to get in believe me, if anybody's got pricey lawyers, it's people related to computers. So you don't want to go down that road. It's awful, 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 awful. So you're best off playing it straight. Good questions though. I like it. Shows that you're thinking. All right, so again, be ready each day because we're gonna have stuff to do, guaranteed. When you get to the lab, if you're in my local class, again, that's one-on-one time. Hey, I don't get this. Hey, could you sit down with me and watch how I'm doing this? Is there a better way? Is there a smarter way? Could you offer me a suggestion on how I might approach this? That's exactly what lab is for, because they've got more individuals to help you, and then it's easier to get that one-on-one time. When we are in the lecture, Brian and I are running around like crazy, trying to make sure you understand what's going on, but we might not be able to give you the kind of attention you need, and that's exactly what the lab is for. Does that make sense? So make sure anything that doesn't make sense in here, lab is where we get that supplemented. And for my digital friends, again, go to those open labs and get the help, or go to the peer tutor sessions and get some help in there. Because again, that's one-on-one time for just you. And you know, again, you can get the attention you need. It's there. So just make sure you're utilizing it. Make sense? Okay, cool. All right. Let's get on to, we'll take a quick look at this week's objective. What's going to happen is each week for the first 3 weeks, we're going to be building stuff, as you might imagine. We start with simple, Gesundheit, and we build more complex later on. And what happens is you're going to build these objects in separate files, and then we have a file that we made for you that's got these columns in it. It's like dun, dun, dun. And what you're going to do is bring the objects in that you created and put them on those pedestals so that you can show off your work on a weekly basis. That's your weekly turn in. So the activities in class add up to the skill checks. If you add up all the skill checks, they lead to your weekly turn in. Does that make sense? So if you can do all the skill checks, you can do the weekly turn in. All right. Does that make sense how those things go together? Again, they're rungs on a ladder, and you need all those steps. Otherwise, you could slip and fall. So make sure you're doing them. I know you're thinking, oh, can I skip this one? It's really better if you don't. Your best bet is no matter how tedious it is, do it, because you're going to be happier with the end result and your level of understanding, which is why you're here anyway, right? So do these skill checks, and then they will help you with your weekly turn-in. All right. In terms of lecture 1, a couple of things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about project creation, and the reason this is important is because whenever you decide to create a project, and I want to make the Death Star, whatever it is you decide you want to make, you're going to have to create a project directory for it in order to begin that process. And so it's really important you know how to do this, obviously. And when we get to week 3, you're going to have to know this information because you're going to have to make a project directory. In weeks 1 and 2, we do all that for you. It's kind of like training wheels on your bike to make it a little bit easier for you to get started. But when we get to week 3, you got to take the wheel and you've got to create your own project directory. You've got to bring in your image planes. You've got to align those, and then you can start building. So this is definitely information you're going to want to retain, as it will come up again, I promise. We'll be talking about Maya's interface. And it's crazy looking. If you look at the interface, you're like, oh my, can somebody hold me? It's scary, I get it. But we're gonna go through the interface. We're gonna talk about what things are called, how they work, a little bit about what they do, so you're feeling more comfortable. And then really the big thing is so that you can learn sort of the terminology for things, because learning Maya is learning a new language, and you have to learn this new language so that you can ask me questions and I understand what you're asking me. And then when I answer you, you actually know what I'm talking about also. Does that make sense? So we need to build your Maya lexicon. We're going to talk about the importance of reference, because that's the first step before we get into the actual modeling, how we utilize that and so forth. And we're going to discuss the use of polygon primitives to start the modeling process, which is very much like illustration. Incidentally, how many of you guys draw? How many artists do I have in there drawing, illustrating? Awesome, good, good. You're going to see there's a lot of parallels between illustration and modeling because they use a lot of the same principles. So those are going to help you out what you understand and know about that. All right, so let's take a look at some of this organization. I know organization is like no fun, it's tedious, right? Oh, I have to name things right, I have to put them in the right folder structure. Why? Well, here's the thing. when you're creating art for yourself, you don't really have to be organized. But you've probably noticed that when you're creating art for yourself, it gets pretty messy, right? Your desk, your room, your stuff is everywhere, but that's okay. It's art for you. When you are doing art for hire, you're working for someone else. And it's not just you. You are one member of a team of people, and it could be several hundred. Organization becomes very important because what you're doing goes to someone else, and then to someone else, and to someone else. So you need to name things properly. You need to create the correct folder structure. Otherwise, people can't find what you've done. And if they can't find it, it's the same as if you didn't do it. Does that make sense? And literally, time is money. They can, on an hourly basis, figure out how much it costs to do a production. And if I'm spending time looking for the stuff that you created, that's not time working, that's me looking. Does that make sense? So organization is a big ticket item. It doesn't seem like it, but it makes a big difference in your pipeline. And again, without it, you have a disastrous situation where, again, nothing can be found. And it leads to chaos. And honestly, when you're working on a team, you don't want to be the weakest link. Does that make sense? That's not how you stay employed. Like when people go, oh, we're working with that guy, you know what I mean? Bad situation. You don't want that. Probably the most valuable thing you have is your name and what's associated with it. Hardworking, good quality work, delivers on time, positive attitude. That's what you want associated with your name. That's employment right there. Does that make sense? You don't want anything else, because once your name is not so good, it's really hard to change that. Does that make sense? Kind of like your reputation. And you don't want to have a bad one, because that means you're not going to get hired, which means you're not going to eat. And that's bad on the good bad scale. Does that make sense? So protect your name. All right. So first things first, again, we're going to talk about the creating and setting of projects and naming. And as I said before, in terms of all these processes, everything goes better, everything's smoother, everybody's happy, and your little CG production pipeline hums along like it's supposed to, and everybody feels like they did a good thing, and there's camaraderie and cocktails for everyone. So let's look into the creation of a project folder. Now, whenever you see one of these slides, Sarah lifting weights, me jogging, and Marcus doing push-ups, you know we're about to do an activity that we're going to do together. Now, in terms of these activities, there's usually a little bit of information about it, but something you need to be aware of is the activities are kind of like when you were in school and they gave you like worksheets to work on, except we're working with 3D. So what we have is a series of files that you're going to be working on. And those files are all housed inside one folder called the activity file folder for in-class activities. Does that make sense? Okay, now where do you think that folder is? It's on FSO, absolutely. So that's one of the many things you need to download. Again, you don't need to do it right now because you're going to be okay without it for today. But remember that every time you see this slide, we're going to be going to the activity file folder in order to do that. Does that make sense? Okay, and we'll talk more about setting projects and how to do that next. All right, so first things first, let's talk about the creation of a project folder. So let's just say I'm in Maya, right? Having a good time. Woohoo, I'm in Maya. And it's time for me to work on something. I need to make a project. There's this really cool robot that I want to build. And the first thing I need is a project folder system in order to do it. Now, in terms of project folders, I ripped my mic loose. In terms of project folders in Maya are kind of like filing cabinets. And that's how Maya works, because you've got one big folder that holds everything, and then inside that folder, there are a bunch of other little folders. Now, we can organize them by having, the equivalent of drawers, because when you guys are working on a project, whatever it is you happen to work on, you're working on it with Maya. You guys are a team. Does that make sense? The original Odd Couple. Art and math coming together to create art. So it's crazy. But the point is, in order for you both to be organized, in order for you to both be on the same page, you have to have a filing system and you have to know where everything is. Because some folders you need, because it's got information you need to do your job. Some folders Maya needs, so Maya can do Maya's job, which is crazy amounts of math. Does that make sense? So, but without all those folders, we can't do our job. And that is the project folder, Cool Robot. And everything I need is in it. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about how we create a new project when we decide to have one. Okay, so step one, I'm going to go to the main menu item File and click on it with the left mouse button. You'll see a drop-down menu, okay? And drop-down menu means it pops up when you click on it. And if you come down here, you'll see there's an area called Project Window. And this is how we create projects for Maya, whatever it is we want to work on. So I click on Project Window with my left mouse button. And incidentally, is Maya a 3-button mouse or pen application? Yes. Do you need to either buy a 3-button mouse or use the pen that came with your Wacom tablet? Yes. You cannot use this application with the trackpad. Does that make sense? Not a challenge. It's true. Make sense? So make sure you brought one of those with you when you come to class on Thursday. So I go to my project window and I click on it with the left mouse button. When the project window opens up, you'll see way over here on the right where it says new. I want to make a new project, so that's what I'm going to click on, again with my left mouse button. So the first thing I do is I name the project. And you'll see right up here at the top, it says create project. And I'm going to call mine Cool Robot. Now you'll notice that when I wrote down the name Cool Robot, I capitalized the R in robot. And that's how I show the separation in words. We don't want to use spaces because spaces are non-characters. Non-characters make the machine nuts. Does that make sense? So we don't use spaces. We capitalize. Or if we want to, we can jump in here and put an underscore, whoops, yeah, in between. And that underscore can separate separate words also, but not spaces. Does that make sense? Whenever we're naming things, good idea for organizational purposes. Now, you will see that there's a whole bunch of folders in here. These are the folders, and you'll see that it tells you what goes into each one. And we typically use the default settings, and we don't change them. You might be working at a company that will say, hey, please call the scenes folder this, please call the images folder that, but typically we work from default, so you shouldn't have to change any of that in the overwhelming majority of the cases. So all you have to do is hit, oh, hold on 1 second. One more thing, location. It's asking you, where do you want me to create this project folder? Where do you want me to put it? I'm gonna make it, where do you want it to go? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come over here to this yellow folder, and yellow folders typically mean navigate me to this, show me the path to where this thing is. So what I'm gonna do is click on the yellow folder, and Maya is saying, where do you want me to make this project? I'm gonna choose my desktop, just because it's easy for me to demonstrate what's happening. So that's where it's gonna go when I'm all done, to my desktop. And if you choose select, you'll see that the path is now showing it's gonna go to my desktop. Do you guys see that? I know the print is really small, but it says desktop. So when I hit accept, what happens is when I go to my desktop, all of a sudden I've got this folder called Cool Robot. And when I open it up, you'll see inside all of these folders and the workspace icon. And this is what I need to do a project. This is what Maya needs. And this icon here is just what builds the Maya interface so that you have something to look at when you open it up. Does that make sense? Okay. And again, each folder has a job and they all do different things. The scenes folder is where you're going to find your Maya files. When you're trying to save them, they go there. When you're trying to open them, they're in here. Your source images folder is where you're going to have your reference images. Whatever it is you're trying to build is going to be in there. Your textures will be in there, all kinds of stuff. And those are the default locations where Maya goes to find things. Does that make sense? Maya's been told, hey, if you're looking for a source image, it's in the source images folder. If you're looking for a texture, go to the source images folder. Does that make sense? So that's where it's going to go to look for it. So if you put it somewhere else, it won't be able to find it. All right. So I've created my project and I'm ready to start my Cool Robot, except Now I have to tell Maya that that's actually what I want to work on. And this is big because it seems like it's a little deal and it's not that complicated. You have to set your project every time you work on Maya. And this is the way you explain to Maya, hey, this is what I want to work on right now. Because you're going to have many things that you're working on, but you have to tell Maya, I want to work on this now. Maya is very linear in its thought process. So if you don't explain things very thoroughly, bad things happen. It gets crazy. Does that make sense? Files don't save where you want them to save. They get lost. Textures are missing. Image planes can't be found. All kinds of stuff goes amok if you don't set your project. Does that make sense? Okay, so setting the project, how do I do that? Because it seems important. Why, yes, it is. Let me show you. So setting the project goes like this. Again, you go to your main menu item, File. Click on it with the left mouse button. Just underneath Project window is Set Project, because they do go hand in hand. So I go to Set Project, and I click on that with the left mouse button. And this is where Maya says, okay, where's the folder that you want to work on? All right. All I have to do is go to where that folder is. It's on my desktop. So if I go to my desktop, I'll see, oh yeah, there's Cool Robot. Now I don't have to go into Cool Robot. I don't have to choose any of these folders inside. All I have to do is choose the folder for Cool Robot and hit set. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I hit set. Now Maya knows what I want to work on. But very important, setting the project and opening the file are two totally different things. Okay, for beginners, sometimes they get confused. Well, I set the project, why didn't it open? Setting the project has nothing to do with opening files. That's just telling Maya, this is what I want to work on. And then you go, hey Maya, I'd like to open a file. And then Maya goes, well, okay, which one do you want? Because you told me which cabinet to look in. Does that make sense? So if you want to work on something else, you got to set your project to that. Does that make sense? That's how we change gears. That's how Maya changes gears. That's how we save things where we know they're supposed to go. Does that make sense? How many of you guys have ever lost a file? Yeah, that's frustrating, right? Tremendously so. This keeps everything to a minimum in terms of the chaos. Set the project. So simple. Please do it. All right. So that is setting the project. Any questions on setting the project and how that all goes down? Anything at all? Okay. It's pretty straightforward, but it is critical. And you will see that when we start doing our activities. Because when we go to do an activity, guess what we have to do before we get started? Set the project to the activity file folder. So Maya knows where to go find the activities we need. So good, you guys are catching on. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Maya's interface. Again, it is very intimidating because there's a lot of stuff going on and it's all gray now. I don't know, it's like cool and Batman-like or something, I don't know. They decided, I guess visually it's supposed to be less intense when you're looking at it for a long time, if it's got sort of more middle gray colors. Honestly, I liked Maya better when it had candy-like bright color buttons, but you know, I guess that's because you always like what you started with. But this is the way it is now. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Maya. Where the heck are things and what are they called? All right, so there's going to be a lot of terms flying around here, so probably a good idea to jot some of this stuff down. And again, please ask me questions. I don't mind repeating myself at all. I don't mind saying things in another way if it's not making sense. That doesn't bother me in the least. But when I'm talking to you guys, you can see every once in a while I stop and I'm kind of taking your temperature. Are we getting it? Are we in an understanding? And if I feel like you guys are getting it, I'm going to move on unless you say something. Does that make sense? So if you have a question or you need to hear it another way, just ask. I'm totally fine with that. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so let's talk about Maya's interface and what's going on in here. All right, across the top here, we have what we call the main menu items. And these main menu items are like categories for things because Maya does a lot of stuff. And basically, I need to be able to get to all the different things Maya needs. And one of the ways Maya organizes is using these main menu items. The main menu items are the locations where tools and actions are housed. An example of a tool would be like a screwdriver or a hammer or a saw. An example of an action would be like, glue these things together, cut that thing in half, make a hole in this. Does that make sense? Tools and actions. So in order to get to a tool or an action, all you have to do is go to the main menu item, whichever one you're looking for, and click with the left mouse button, and you get a drop-down menu. The drop-down menu has many, many tools in here for you to use. All right. Now, quite a few of these tools have like a little box at the end here. That's the options box. The options box changes the way the tool works. For example, hammers drive nails in as well as pull them out. It depends on how you're holding it that determines how it works. So the option for the hammer would be, how am I holding it? Does that make sense? So if I need to see the options on a tool, I go to the little box at the end and I open it up, right? So if I go to the extrude tool and I click the options box with my left mouse button, I now have all of the options associated with the tool, the things that I can play with to change the way the tool works. Now, what's handy about these options boxes is often there is an edit word up in the upper left-hand corner, and that's how you can reset the tool. So if you have changed the, excuse me, thank you. If you have changed the way the tool is functioning, you can reset it back to default. So if it's doing something you don't recognize, reset the tool, because that's a great way to get it back to the way it was when it first got opened. The other thing that's in there, which is super cool, is there's often a little help, little word help in there, which you click with the left mouse button. And as long as you have an internet connection, it takes a second, but as long as you have an internet connection, it will literally launch. Yeah, let's look at that. It will launch your internet, and it literally opens up the options for the tool, and you can do some reading, and it talks about how the tool works, the way you can play with it. There's often related topics on the bottom that will lead you to more information. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can learn about any tool, whether I showed it to you or not. Does that make sense? This is another great resource for getting help. You can even type in whatever you want to know about. It's got a search engine in it, so you can find the things that you're looking for. So it's very helpful. Again, as long as you've got that internet connection, you're good to go. But again, and then you utilize the tool by clicking either click the tool's name or apply, and it will do whatever its job is. All right. Now, this here is called the status line. And basically what this thing is doing is it's letting you know what kind of work you are currently set up to do. Because Maya does many, many things, and it would be impossible to have all the tools visible at one time, right? So we're all about organization. So what we've done is we've set up this status line to explain what it is we're working on, so Maya will give us just the tools we need, right? So let's say, for example, Maya was an application that built houses, like real houses, like the one we live in, not virtual ones. But if Maya builds real houses, we don't use the same tools for like shingling as we do for interior painting, right? Paintbrushes and drop cloths, right? Versus crowbars and that sticky black stuff that I'll never get off of my boots. Does that make sense? So point being, I've got to organize these tools by the kind of job I'm doing. So you'll notice that it's currently set for modeling. We are a polygon modeling class, so it should be set for that because most of the tools you want are going to be there. Because if you have that set for something else, like say we switched it to animation, you'll see that our main menu items changed because Maya now thinks, oh, we're going to do some animating now. So it's given me different tools and actions to work with. Does that make sense? Okay, so make sure it's set for the job you're trying to do, and then you'll have the things you need. All right, this area down here is called the shelves and the shelf tabs. And what you'll notice is you can click on these tabs, and what they do is they give you all these really cool buttons. And what these buttons are shortcuts to main menu items. So for example, if I go to this icon right here, a little help balloon pops up and it says extrude the selected component. So it's telling me that's the extrude tool, and it tells you what it does a little bit. Extrude the selected component. So I can either use that button, or I can go to Edit Mesh, and then there's the extrude tool. So the buttons are basically shortcuts to main menu items. Does that make sense? It can help you out. All right. And actually, not only does the little help balloon to pop you up to tell you what things are called, if you hover your cursor over anything in Maya, what you will notice is that down here in the lower left-hand corner, that's Maya's help line. And that will tell you what something is called and a little bit about what it does. So if you know what something is called, guess what you can do? Go ahead, I meant that. You can look it up, exactly. If you know the name of something, you can use Maya's help documents and find it, right? So again, if you have questions, it starts with, well, what the heck is it? And you look that up, and then, oh, okay, now I know what to ask about, right? It's kind of like doing a Google search for something. You know, I need cool cars. Okay, no. Muscle cars, no. Cars with 5-liter engines or bigger. Okay, now we're, you know, so you kind of narrow down to figure out what it is you're actually looking for if you don't know the right term. You got to find it though, anyway. All right, so again, these buttons will lead you to shortcuts so that you don't have to go up here to your menus to get to things. All right, let's talk about, well, actually, while we're on menus here, let's talk a little bit about these items here. This is called the workspace, or the work window, or the panel. There's different names for it, but this is basically your canvas. This is where you create your artwork. And you'll notice that it tells you what kind of camera you're looking through. Like this says persp, which means perspective camera. And if you look at this, it looks like there's depth to it, right? Perspective. Depth is perspective. So this is my perspective camera. And you'll notice that the camera itself has its own little menu items. And you can click on these, and again, they drop down as well. And you can get to various options that have to do specifically with this window. Now, the good news is we don't have just one window. Don't act now. You can actually have 4 windows if you want. If you look in this area here, this is called Maya's saved layouts. And what's going on here is we have different window configurations. The top button is perspective, this big one right here. The next one down is what we call 4-view. And if we click on that, that gives us 4 views of this world that we're going to create, whatever it is we want to make. However, the cameras look different because what you see is 1 perspective camera and 3 what we call orthographic cameras. Orthographic means it doesn't have any depth to it. Everything looks flat, right? So top view, front view, and side view of whatever it is we're looking at. So let's say, for example, I want to create a cube. I can go to my poly modeling tab, click on cube, and it will make a cube for me, right? And I can also see it in all these other views. But you'll notice that in this view, it looks like a cube, but in these views, it looks like a square, right? Orthographic views don't have perspective or depth. So there is no depth. Everything looks 2D or flat. Does that make sense? That's why it looks like a cube, a square here and a cube there. Does that make sense? And just so you can see, it is actually the same object, because if I move it, they all wiggle. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, the cool thing about these different views is I can go into any of those views I want. So for example, let's say I wanted to go into the front view of my object. All I have to do is put my cursor over the front view camera and hit spacebar. Now I'm in that camera, and that fills my screen. So much like it's easier to draw on a big piece of paper, it's easier to work in a larger window. So let's say, okay, you know what, I don't want to be in the front view anymore. What I really want to do is go back to perspective. So I will hit spacebar again, and I go back out to 4-view, and then I put my cursor over the perspective window, and I hit spacebar again, and now I'm in that one. So I can very quickly jump from window to window as I wish to see what I want to see. Does that make sense? Okay. Now you might be wondering, well, what the heck? Why do we have all these different views of the same thing? Well, if I have objects that I'm trying to align, it's very difficult for me to line them up in my perspective view. But if I use my orthographic views, I can line up these objects much more easily. And if it looks good in this orthographic view, and it looks good in this orthographic view, then I know it's all good in my perspective view. Does that make sense? It works kind of like binocular vision. With two different perspectives, I gain precision and the ability to place things. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? All right. How about my digital friends? How are you guys doing? You hanging tough?
Yes.
Good, good. I know it's hard. Good, good, good for you guys. And incidentally, let me tell you, these live lectures, I mean, we do record them, and yay for that, because you can watch them at a later date. But the live ones, I think, are more productive for you. So if you can get to these, definitely come to these, because you have the opportunity to ask questions. Brian puts in additional information in the chat box there for you guys to help keep you up to speed and give you additional materials. It is a tremendous resource. So if you can make it to the live ones, do it. It's going to make a difference. All right. So we've talked about the windows a little bit, right? The different window configurations and how we use spacebar to jump around. But you probably noticed, hey, wait, he was moving stuff in there. How did he move stuff? So let's talk about that. Right here, this area is called the toolbox. The toolbox is kind of like your hands. This is how you mess with stuff, right? This first tool up here is called the select tool. And literally that's what it does, is select things. Because sometimes you just want to grab something. You're not necessarily moving it just yet. You're not necessarily doing anything to it. You just want to say, hey, this is the thing I want to deal with. So we use the select tool. And when you choose this little arrow, all you have to do is come to the object and click with the left mouse button, and you've selected an object. And you'll know it's selected because it lights up bright green, right? Now, something that happens when you selected an object, you'll notice that this area over here, there's no information over here. It's completely blank. But when I select something, all of a sudden there's all kinds of stuff in here. This area over here is called the channel box. And the icon for the channel box is this tiny one way over here in the upper right-hand corner. And you also will have tabs on the right-hand side over here for the channel box and the attribute editor. And you can click on these different tabs to get there as well. But the channel box represents information about the selected object. So if there's nothing selected, there's no information in there because it can't tell you anything about it. But as soon as you select a piece of geometry, it tells you the object's name, pSphere 1. It tells you where it is in space. That's what that translation information is. And if there's any inputs that you can make adjustments to in terms of how it's made, they'll be listed under the input node. Does that make sense? Nothing selected, nothing in the channel box. But if I select an object, ooh, now I've got information about it, right? For example, if I select this object, you'll see under the inputs, it's listing the object. If I click on that with my left mouse button, you can see that this thing is made of 20 subdivisions by 20 subdivisions. I could change it to 10. And it's lighter. Does that make sense? Places you can make adjustments. And you can even name the geometry. You see it's named pSphere 1, but we don't leave anything at its default names. I can just click up here on this field at the top, and I can call it whatever I want. Does that make sense? That sphere is called Brian. All right, so point being, we name stuff. Make sense? If I've got a scene filled with pSphere 1, pSphere 97, pSphere 238, I don't even know what I'm looking at. But if I call this Brian, and that Bob, and that nostril, I know what everything is. Does that make sense? We name things. All right, so talked a little bit about the channel box. We talked about the select tool. Let's go down a little bit. This is called the move tool. Guess what this does? That's right. That's right. In terms of making this object move, I can make it move around. I grab the arrows with my left mouse button and just pull on them. I can make it go this way. I can make it go this way. I can make it go this way. The different arrows correspond to axes of movement, right? If I want to move it up, I'm using the green arrow. Well, it's yellow now because I have it selected. But if I move it up, the arrow is green. Green is Y. Maya is a Y up application, meaning Y is up. Above the grid is a positive value. Guess what below the grid is? Negative value. Does that make sense? Okay. So if we want to move this object above or below the grid, it will actually calculate it. If you look over there in the channel box, you'll see my translate Y value is 2.891. That's where it is in space, positive 2.891. If I put it below the grid, my Y value becomes a negative value. Does that make sense? Below the grid, negative, above the grid, positive. But it's all Y. Just is it positive or negative? Now you might be wondering, well, what do the numbers correlate to? The numbers correlate to grid units. It's an ambiguous form of measurement. Could be inches, could be miles, it's whatever I decide. But it helps you quantify how much did I move it. Does that make sense? Above is positive, below is negative. Guess where it goes if I punch in all zeros? Right in the center, origin, right? Math class finally paying off, right? Okay, so that's how things move using the move tool. Now it's true, it's a little awkward to grab specific arrows and pull them. It's kind of slow, right? And the odds of you being able to guess what those values are going to be are astronomically against. You're not going to know exactly how much you want to move something. But what we do when we're trying to move an object is we can grab it from the middle with the left mouse button. And you'll see it moves very quickly like that. So what I'll do is take the object from the middle, put it ballpark where I want it to go, and then I will use my other windows and my arrows for precision in terms of its placement. And again, when it looks good here and it looks good here, I know it's all good out there. Does that make sense? They all work together. Yes?
Is there like a hack key to where you don't have to grab it from the middle every time? Just
No, you can grab it from the middle. Yeah. Again, the idea is everything you're looking at in Maya is all math, right? Which thank goodness we don't have to do. But we've designed tools to make it more like an artist would use. So we can just grab things and move them. Maya figures out all the math. Thank you, Maya, because I don't want to do it. So yeah, the tools are really going to be the way you move stuff around. Now, are there instances where you might know values? Yes. And if you're building like a real car, would things have to be exact and very precise? Yes, because if you're building a real car and they're going to take these schematics and make actual parts for it, they better fit together or somebody's going to get sued, right? This is entertainment, man. We're making movies and video games, so as long as it looks good, we are good to go. Does that make sense? So not to worry. Good question, though. All right. You still buckled in, my online friends? Okay. The racing harness. All right, so that's the move tool. There we go. I like that guy already. All right, let's take a look at another tool. Rotate tool. Guess what that does? It rotates things, right? So if I want to rotate this cube, I grab the specific axis that I want to rotate it on, and I manipulate that with the left mouse button. So if I want to rotate this in Z, I rotate it, and you notice that the rotate Z value has changed. And those values correspond to degrees. So if I plug in 45 degrees, that's what I'm going to get. So this is an instance where you might actually know the exact number you're looking for, because it's degrees. Was that your question?
There is an extra axis all the way out.
Yes. There's a,
Depends on your point of view, right?
this one is kind of like grabbing the tool in the middle, what happens is if you make an adjustment using the outer ring, watch the rotate values. If you use the outer ring, you'll notice that all of the values change because you're basically rotating on all three of them at one time. Does that make sense? Which is a little bit reckless, but sometimes you're trying to depict something reckless. You know what I mean? Like let's say I'm animating a meteor crashing into the earth. I want that rock to spin irregularly because that's going to make it more plausible. Make sense? All right. Oh, scale tool. Let's look at that guy. Scale tool, also very cool. Incidentally, in terms of your manipulators, if they're too small, if you use your plus key, they get bigger. If you use your minus key, they get smaller. It's a personal preference how you want to run that. All up to you, but plus and minus will change the size if you want. When I activate the scale tool, what do you notice about it? They got the axes, right? And the colors. Y is green. Y is always green. Z, or depth, is blue. Red, or X, is side to side. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's got color coding also. So if I scale in Y, you'll notice it gets bigger in both positive and negative Y at the same time. If I scale in X, it gets bigger in positive and negative X, right? You might be wondering, well, how the heck did I know that was definitely negative X? He must have the force. Yes, I do, but I'm not using it right now. The way I can tell which side is negative, the manipulator is always on the positive side. Does that make sense?
Bottom left, you can see it way at the bottom left, there's a little navigator right there, and that's all.
This is the axis indicator for the universe that you are in. So you can always double check against that. Does that make sense? But these axes, positive, so that's got to be negative. Positive, that's got to be negative. Positive, that's got to be negative. Make sense? All right. Now, there's also a cube in the middle, and I know you're going, oh, what happens in there? Here's where I change the size of the object, but I don't change the proportions. If I scale it from the middle with the left mouse button, it gets bigger and it gets smaller, but it doesn't change proportions. Now you'll notice that when an object is first created, all the scale values are 1/1 scale, actual size. If I wanted to make this cube 3 times bigger, if I plug in a 3 for all of those values, now it is exactly 3 times bigger. No change in proportions, it's just 3 times bigger. Make sense? But you got to change all of them the same value. Again, 1 brings it back to its original size. 1/1 scale. Make sense? Okay. So again, that's the scale tool there. In terms of what's going on down here, this is Maya's timeline. All right, we won't get into this too much because we won't be animating, sadly. But in terms of the timeline, how many of you guys are familiar with a flip book? Flip books and how they work, right? You draw a picture on a piece of paper. On the next piece, you draw a picture again, a little bit different. Next picture, you draw it again. And when you flip through those images, if they're at the right rate of speed, we create the illusion of animation through a phenomenon called persistence of vision. So we think it's moving, but it's not really. It's just a kind of a trick our mind plays on us. Well, in Maya, each stop on this timeline is a frame or a single drawing of a flip book. So if you've got 24 frames, you got 1 second of animation. Does that make sense? We're basically making pictures, just we're making them in 3D rather than drawing them. These are basically your animation play controls, and it just works like a DVD player. Play your animation forward, stop. Play your animation backward, stop. Go 1 keyframe back, 1 keyframe forward. Go 1 frame back, 1 frame forward. Go to the beginning, go to the end. Just allows you to jump around real fast. This area here is called Maya's layer editor, and this is where we create layers, and this is where we do a lot of organizing. You know, we talked about organizational capacities within the Maya file. That's what's going on in there. If any of you have used Photoshop, any of you guys have used Photoshop before? Okay, if you've used Photoshop, you know what I'm talking about. the strength of Photoshop is its layers. Well, there's layers in Maya too. It's not quite as powerful as the Photoshop layers, but what it really does help out a lot with is organization. And that's really what it's all about. Setting this stuff up so that the scene is organized and usable by the next person who needs to. So we'll get more into that as we go. But we can create layers and put stuff on layers, all kinds of fun stuff like that. Actually, while we're here, I'll just show you. If you want to make a layer, you just go to the word layer and click with the left mouse button. And from the drop down, you can choose Create Empty Layer. And it makes a layer for you. All right. Now, this layer doesn't do anything right now. And I know that because if I click this little V for visibility, nothing happens. So this is a non-functional layer. It's also not named, which is a no-no. So the first thing I'm going to do is name this layer. So I'm just going to double click on it, and that will give me the opportunity to name it. I'm going to call it the Brian layer. So now it's named, yay, still not functional. Yeah, I know, bummer, right? So here's the thing, in order for this layer to work, I have to actually put this object on that layer. So with the layer highlighted in blue and the object selected, if I hold down the right mouse button, I can choose Add Selected Object. And then it will take this object and put it on that layer. Now I know if it works because if I click the little V for visibility, and it's basically like the eyeball in Photoshop, if the object disappears, that is a functional layer. So when I say, make sure you create a layer for every object you build for me, I mean, you have to have a layer for everything, and it's got to be named, and it's got to work, or it's not a layer. Does that make sense? That's an easy one. You don't want to miss it. All right. Let's see. We already talked about the channel box. Again, information about the selected object, and again, that's the icon for it. So if you need to launch it, you can click that, or look for the tab over here on the right-hand side. All right. So we've taken a quick spin through Maya. We're starting to learn some terms. We're starting to see how things work. So now, how are we doing on time, Brian?
It's 4:24.
Awesome.
We got till 4:45 if there's another class.
Ah, those guys are no fun.
I know.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We will talk a little bit more, and we'll go back to the interface activity if we have time left. We'll come back to that. But I have a fun little thing for you guys to do. But first, a little bit more information. Yeah, got to get through that. So 5 phases of modeling for this class. What we're going to do is talk about reference gathering and the importance of the reference, the block out, modeling the asset, and then UV mapping it for texturing, and then we get into cleanup, prepping the model to go to somebody else. The first stop is reference. It's also the most important stop. Good reference makes all the difference in the world in terms of the quality and the speed at which you can model. The better the reference, the better your job you're going to do, and the faster you can do it. So it's always great to have really good reference because it affects the outcome of the art as well. Now, when you guys are looking at reference, this is something I want you to start doing. Think about the simple primitive shapes that are inside the objects that you're building. Because again, modeling is a lot like drawing. So if you can look at an object and see the simple primitive shapes that it would take to draw an object, you're going to understand how to model an object. And figuring out what you need to do before you even get started is such a huge time saver as a modeler. Because when you want to build something, you don't just like sit down and, okay, let's go and try to build it, because it's going to be a slow process. But if you're looking at your reference image and you're studying it and you're thinking about, oh, okay, I think I'm going to have to build that. I'm going to use that using this tool. I'm going to create an edge loop there. I'm going to do this over here. It's almost like playing chess, where if you can think a couple of moves ahead, you can actually work faster. So you want to do the brain work first before you actually go to the job. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's a good strategy, but we'll talk more about that as we go. The reason being, it doesn't matter how complex the object is or whether it's organic or inorganic. Everything is made of these simple shapes, and you have to be able to see them in order to start the process. Make sense? Hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
How about my digital friends? You guys on board? We're on the Polygon train? All right. So again, just like when we're drawing, you know, if I'm going to draw a telephone pole, what simple shape do I draw first? Cylinder, right? Because that occupies most of the volume I need. So if I'm modeling a telephone pole, guess what I start with? Cylinder. Make sense? So thought processes are similar to each other. But before we start getting into that, let's start taking a look at how we get graded. What's that?
Millennium Falcon.
It's the Millennium Falcon. That's not just any spaceship. That's my other ride, the Millennium Falcon.
That's Spider-Man.
Guinness, yeah, Spider-Man. Cat, absolutely. What we're talking about is silhouette. Silhouette is a 2D concept, flat, right? No surface detail. However, silhouette is very important. As a modeler, job one is hit silhouette of the object you're building. Does that make sense? If I don't recognize it for what it's supposed to be, you've missed your mark as a modeler. Gotta hit silhouette, because silhouette, which seems like not that big a deal, can actually help you identify different species of dog, even different kinds of tree, with no surface detail whatsoever. But silhouette is so powerful, I can do that. Does that make sense? That's why it's so important. Silhouette, another term for that is shape. Make sense? Shape, silhouette. As a result, this is something we're grading on. This is half of, does it look right? Does that make sense? That 34% we're talking about starts with silhouette. So if this is the reference image you're working from, these two silhouettes are close enough that they would earn the silhouette points. I can see that's definitely that lamp. These models are not close enough. The silhouette does not match closely enough. They don't get the silhouette points. Does that make sense? It is yes, no. Close enough or no. Now, the other side of does it look right is form. Form is surface detail, depth related detail, right? This is where we see the depth related with the object, not just its silhouette. They work together and they are both part of does it look right. But form is that surface that we were ignoring before. So when we take a look at, again, here's my reference image. These two lamps are close enough to that one. The depth related details are there. I can see these and go, yeah, that's definitely that lamp. These guys, too different, too far away. Does that make sense? So it is possible that you can earn the silhouette points, but not the form points. You have to get both, and that equals does it look right? Does that make sense? Okay. Silhouette, shape, and form. Those are the things that we go together to figure out what it is we need to do. All right, let's do a quick, we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and do that activity because it's pretty fun. Let me know a little bit about the Maya interface. We're going to do our, whoop, that one. We're going to play a little bit with Maya and navigate. Now, again, if you don't have Maya, don't worry. Today, you're not in any trouble. But what I want to show you is I'm going to create some simple shapes and just move them around. And I want you to try to do it too if you can. All right. So first things first, I'm going to minimize this. Here's my copy of Maya. Now, when you first open Maya, there's nothing in the scene at all. okay? And what you noticed is when I wanted to make stuff, I click on one of these simple primitives and they just appear, right? If I want them to go away, I hit delete, upper right-hand corner. Yes?
Do your default always appear in the center?
Yes, they're gonna appear there if you have it set like I have it, and that's what I was gonna get into next. If you go to your create menu item, and you go to the polygon primitives, which is where all of your polygon primitives live, the shelf doesn't have them all, but they're all listed in here. You will see that there is a polygon primitives. You will see there's a there's a thing in here underneath your polygon primitives called interactive creation. Mine is checked off. By default, it's checked on. Now, the difference between the two is this. I'm going to turn it on so you can see. So I'm going to turn it on by clicking the little empty box there. So now it's on, and you notice that if I go to create polygon primitives, you see it now is checked on. If I create an object, it says, okay, draw on the grid. What? Okay, so with my left mouse button, wherever I put it, it's going to make the bottom of my cylinder. And as soon as I let go, it stops. And now it says, okay, how tall do you want to make it? Okay, left mouse button, drag, okay, there it is. So it appeared where I created it. Now, in all of my time using Maya, I have come to the conclusion that I never draw and create exactly the shape I want when I first draw it. I always end up manipulating it. So I don't like interactive creation because I'm going to change it anyway, and it's like 2 or 3 more steps for me to do. So what I like to do is under create polygon primitives, I uncheck interactive creation. And what that means is when I click on something, it appears. Does that make sense? That is a personal preference on my part. You don't have to do that, but that's why mine's doing what it's doing. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Okay, good. So I've got this primitive here, and what I'd like you to do is just create 3 simple primitives. You know, you can do a cube, a sphere, and a cone. And what I'd like you to do is use your tools of manipulation, and I want you to use your different windows over here and navigate and try to place the sphere right on top of the cube, right? And again, line it up in this view, line it up in that view, and make sure good over here. And then make a cone and bring that up to the top. But, oh no, you're so tricky. I want you to flip it over 180 degrees so it's facing the other direction. And then, of course, don't make it poke the sphere, and line it up on top. Now, in order to do all that stuff, you're going to have to be able to drive around within the perspective window, okay, navigating within Maya. And again, this is where that 3-button mouse comes in, because in order to navigate space in Maya, if you look at your keyboard right now, you guys see that there's an option key. It's 2 keys to the left of your space bar. If you hold down the option key and your left mouse button, you get your tumble function. Tumble allows you to see an object from any view, up, down, left, right, right? Tumble, option and left mouse button. If you hold down option again and hold down your middle mouse button, you get the track or dolly function. And this is what allows you to move alongside an object, up or down, side to side, but you're not getting any closer to the object, okay? It's almost like you're at a frozen distance. Option key and middle mouse button held down. Option key and right mouse button allows you to zoom out or zoom in. So you can zoom in and out. So navigation within the perspective window is tumble, track or dolly, zoom in or out. And that's how you get around. Now, if you're like way away from something and you're trying to get closer to it, it's kind of a drag to keep dragging up on it like that. But what you can do is select an object and then press F on your keyboard as in Frank, and that is frame or focus. And then now that zooms right into view and you got a good look at that. So if you don't have a mouse today and you're realizing I need a mouse but you need to kind of manipulate a little bit and play along because you want to. Select it, press F for frame, and then now it's much easier for you to look around. Does that make sense? Sort of a cheat workaround a little bit. All right. Now, if you go to your orthographic views, the first thing you'll notice is no tumble function. Well, yeah, orthographic means no depth. It's not 3D, so there's no tumbling. You can't tumble. So you can track or dolly, you can zoom in or out because it's an orthographic camera. It'll allow you to do those things, but no tumbling. If you want to tumble, you got to go to the jungle, the perspective window. Make sense? Okay. Now, I'm going to walk around real quick and just see how you guys are doing. I just want to see if you can create some shapes. Use your tools to move them around. Just kind of get the hang of the interface a little bit, and then we're going to delve into the skill check for this class, for this lecture 1, and get you guys started on that so you can see what's coming and what you will need to do in order to be successful with it. Yeah, no worries. I got it. I'm a fairly agile individual. Right mouse button over the cone. 2 fingers on the pad. Put them down. There you go. Whoop, try that again. 2 fingers down. Upper right hand corner, object mode. The circular menu set, there you go. Ooh, I'm sorry. Good, good. Looks like you guys are having some fun. How goes it? Didn't blow up yet, that's good. Pardon me. Good, good, creating shapes. Pencil. Very nice. Here we go. Oh, good. Excellent. Creating shapes. Good, good, good. Yeah.
So I've got the basic sizing down. How do I make the rescape?
Ah, we will talk about that as we go. I don't want to give away too much too soon. You'll be bored. All right, cool. Looks like you guys are doing pretty well with this. Those of you who are able to do so, yeah. Oh, that's okay. Let me just show you something. If you guys did something to your interface and you're like, oh shoot, it doesn't look like it used to, something happened, how do I get it back to the way it was? One of the things that you can do is reset your preferences. So if you have Maya selected, you'll notice in the upper right left-hand corner, you'll see the word Maya. You guys all see this? This is important. Make sure you see it. The word Maya. If you click on that, you can go to Maya's preferences specifically. And when you open up Maya's preferences, you'll notice one of the things that you can do is go to the word edit and choose restore default settings. That will reset Maya to its default settings, the way it was when you first downloaded it. And oftentimes that fixes interface irregularities that you did. Does that make sense? Because that does happen sometimes. So that's a good one to know. And if you missed it, you'll be asking me about it later. I know it. All right. And I just hit delete to make those things go away. All right, let's take a look at our skill check for this lecture. All right, for the skill check, again, the culmination of what you learned how to do today for lecture 1, we already have work to do. Yes, you do. Always, always. And when you get to lab, make sure you do the other stuff first, but then you'll get to this. I know this is more fun, but you got to make sure you download and install Google Chrome, make sure you've downloaded all the folders you need, sure you've got Maya installed and ready to go, make sure you've read the important, the welcome letter and important information because the rules to this class are in there. Make sure that you have watched the introduction video. Again, it kind of talks about what we're doing here. Like I said, there's really not a great deal of redundancy in there. Really, it's about making sure you can be successful. And anything you sort of gloss over, I can almost guarantee you it's going to come back and get you. So don't let that happen. Use this first day wisely because this is your chance to get your head on straight and ready to go. Does that make sense? Okay, so there should not be boredom on lab 1. All right, so let's take a look at the skill check. The skill check for today is we're going to be rebuilding Captain Idaho in the Build Me exercise so that he looks like the reference images that we provided. Now, in terms of the reference images, those are on FSO, of course. And let me see if I've got FSO up and running here. Do I have it? I don't know if I don't even know if I went in there. Let me see. Boop. I don't know why, but mine always does that. But that's okay. Oftentimes with technology, persistence is the key. Refresh your browser, keep doing it. Eventually it pans out. All right, so let's take a look at lecture 1. Again, FSO has got all of this stuff for you to do, and I'm hoping you did it all. But let's go into, oh, this is week 4. This isn't even us, but that's okay, I can still use it. Manage the section, and I'm gonna go to my week 1, lecture 1 skill check. And I'm gonna preview it. And this is what you'll see on your end. Lecture 1 skill check, the Build Me. You can see that when we open the file, it looks like a dreadful explosion has taken place. But this is our goal when we put the guy back together. And incidentally, if you want this picture, you know, just like any image that you can get on the internet, you just grab it, drag it onto your desktop, and then boom, you own it. Thank you. So now I got this file, and I know that this is my goal, this is my objective, my reference image. This is what Captain Idaho should look like when he's all done, right? Now, in terms of skill checks, just like the activity file folder is where all of our activities are housed, guess where the skill check files are? Close, in the skill check file folder. So we have activity file folder for the in-class activities, and we have this skill check file folder for the skill checks. And it's just, it helps with the organization. I know I need my activities during the class, and I need my skill checks at the end of each class, the stuff that I'm working on. So again, that's another download on FSO. And then when it's time to work on it, so I want to work on my Build Me assignment, right? So the first thing I do is set my project to the folder. So what I did was, and these instructions are on FSO, you'll notice that I have a folder called 3DF, the year and the month that I took the class. It'd be a good idea if you created one of those too. And then in that folder, I put my activity file folder, I've got my skill check file folder, I've got my asset file folders, the things that we're actually going to be building this month, all that stuff is in there. So you always know where it is when it comes time to set your project and find things, it's all there. So what I want to do is set my project to my skill check file folder. So what I'm going to do is go to File, Set Project, right, just like we talked about. And then I'm going to go to my Documents folder where I put all this stuff in my 3DF year and month folder, and then find my skill check file. One click, just select the outside, I don't have to go in, and hit Set. Now I open the file. File, Open Scene. Does that make sense? Again, setting the project and opening the file, two totally different things. So I open the scene, and it says, okay, in your skill check file folder, in your scenes folder, which of these scenes do you want? Does that make sense? Now I go, you know what? I want my Build Me assignment, because that's the assignment for lecture 1, and I hit Open. No need to save this. And then is yes, it's got mental array nodes. Yes, it's okay. You'll find that Maya's a big worry wart and asks you a lot of questions. Everything's fine. When I open up the scene, you'll see, oh no, pieces everywhere. But the good news is I named them, so it's easy for you to find. If I select a piece, its name appears in the channel box. So wouldn't this be a nightmare if every piece was not named, right? That would be awful trying to put this thing back together. But luckily, each of the pieces has a name. This is the potato body. So if I'm looking at this piece and I look at my reference image, right? Does that look right? If you look at Captain Idaho, he's kind of smaller on the top and wider across the bottom, right? Now, if I look at this, it's wider on the top and smaller on the bottom. So what do I need to do? Rotate, that's right, flip it. So I use my rotate tool and just flip them around 180 degrees. And now that's facing the right way. Now the good news is, to rebuild Captain Idaho, you don't have to use any modeling tools, you don't have to create pieces, you don't have to duplicate pieces. Everything you need is in there. You just got to move them using the translate tool, use the rotate tool, and use the scale tool to make them bigger or smaller, and you can rebuild this guy. And again, make sure you're using your reference image as a guide. No, that's not my reference image. That's my go to training window. You want to make sure you're using your reference image as a guide. Where did you go? I'm just going to double click on it. I might have closed it. Use your reference image as a guide so that you can make sure you're building him properly. So, got that. Yay, the head's facing the right way. So now it's time for me to put his nose in place, right? Now, looking at this, I might be like, what the? I have no idea where his nose is. So I'm going to let you in a little secret. If you go to Windows for your main menu item and choose the outliner is an amazing window in Maya which lists everything that's in any given scene that you're looking at. So if you want to find his nose, you can either find the object out here and it will highlight in there, or you can select it here and it will highlight out there. So you can find any piece you need. So once I have his nose selected, now I can take that nose and move it. No? All right, so here's my nose. I'm gonna bring it closer to my face. That's the little post that's supposed to be sticking into my face. So I know I need to rotate it a little bit. So it's at least facing my potato body. Move it into place a little bit. Looks pretty good from this view. Come over here. Oh man, not even close, dude. Move it over here. Bring it down. All right. Nose is in place. All right. Does it look right? No. What's wrong with it? Too small, right? The nose here takes up like 2/3 of his face. If I look at my nose here, he's got a like cute little button nose. So what tool do I need? Scale tool. Is that what online said?
Vivon had it.
Yay, Vivon. So we go to the scale tool and we scale. Now, important thing about the scale tool, if I scale using just the X, right? That doesn't look right. I stretched it. If I scale just using the Z, also not quite right. But if I scale using the light blue cube in the middle, I don't change the proportions of my nose, I just make it bigger. Does that make sense? Scale from the middle. Very important. So I can try to match what I'm looking at here. Right? So now my nose is the right size. Make sense? So to rebuild Captain Idaho and learn how to navigate this space, I will use my move tool, my rotate tool, and my scale tool. I will use my orthographic views in conjunction with my perspective view for accuracy and placement. And I will navigate within my windows using Option and the left mouse button, Option and the middle mouse button, Option and the right mouse button. And that's how I'll be able to get around. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So this is what we're going to be doing. That's what it's going to take to rebuild Captain Idaho so that he comes back together again. And he'll be looking good in the hood once we do that. But for right now, he's missing some parts. But the good news is every piece is there. You just got to get them where they're supposed to go. Oh, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Something very important to notice about Maya. Maya files come in two varieties, MA and MB. And Maya ASCII or Maya binary is the term for it. And it's almost like chocolate and vanilla. They're just two different flavors of ice cream. They're both ice cream and they're both good, just everybody's got their preferences. So you'll notice that when I open a file, right next to the name of the file, it will tell you what kind of file it is. Like this one, for an example, is an MA, my ASCII. Does that make sense? You guys see that? Again, this is another big ticket item. Don't let this get you. The reason it's important is because when you want to save the file, you have to save the file as the same type it was when it was originally created. Because if you try to save it with a different name, Maya's going to go, no, I can't do that. You've got conflicting nodes, or I forget. It panics. The panic button gets all red, and it won't do it. So if you want to save your file, you have to save it as the same kind of file. So the steps for saving a file are these. If you go to File, Save Scene As. So you choose that. And then here's where you choose what kind of file it is. You'll see it says Maya binary. That's an MB file, .mb. But my original file is a .ma. So what I have to do is switch it from MB to MA, Maya ASCII. I can't just type an MA at the end. That doesn't change the file type it is. You have to actually switch it when you save it. Okay? And then now I can name it. So I can highlight this field. And again, in terms of the naming convention, we have very specific names for all the files we want you to turn in. And it's at the bottom of every activity, so you can't miss it. And the good news is the naming convention we use is the naming convention the whole school uses. So if you learn it in here, you'll be good for the rest of your classes here. And the convention is you name it last name underscore first name, right? Not mine though, put yours in there. Underscore, and then you put in whatever the assignment is. This is our lecture 1 skill check. Underscore what class you're in, 3DF, underscore, and then you put the month that you are taking this class. This is May, so we are 1805. The year 2018, the 5th month. So we put in 1805. Now this file is ready to be saved, and it's going to get a decent grade because, believe it or not, naming files, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is, because if I can't find your files because they're not named properly, you can't get credit for it. Therefore, naming your file right is almost worth 10 points. So if you want to go from a 100 to almost a 90, just name it wrong. Does that make sense? Don't do that. Name the files properly. As I said, we give you the naming convention. It's on each activity. So just make sure you do it right. It's there. The only way you would miss it is if you literally did not consult FSO, and why would you do that? That's crazy. So make sure you're saving things right, name them right. We have a procedure for turning things in, and that's on FSO, how to do that. So literally everything you need is there. You only get into trouble when you just start deciding how things are done. That's close enough. I think I saw that in class. Watch the video closely, study the procedure, look over the information, and you'll do great. Make sense? Hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
Okay, cool. Good. Again, following instruction is a really big piece of this line of work, and that's why we're trying to get you into that mindset and that attitude. What exactly do you want? How exactly do you want it? You have to think of yourself that way. We are basically 3D copy machines. They give us a picture, a 2D image, and we make a 3D version of it. We want to make it as close to perfect as we possibly can, and we want to give it to them exactly the way they asked for it, exactly when they asked for it. Does that make sense? We don't have the upper hand. This whole, I'm a rock star artist, I show up late when I feel like it, I work when I feel like it, and everybody kisses my feet and throws cash at me. That's not this line of work. Does that make sense? Not the way it works. We are grateful to be working. We want to do a great job so we can continue to work. Make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So again, this is what we got going on. for the first skill check. But like I said, make sure you pour over FSO and read everything we gave you, download everything we gave you, create folders, organize this stuff so you know where it is. You want to hit the ground running on Thursday because we've got a ton to talk about. We always have a ton to talk about, so you got to be prepared for that. After you've done that, then you go work on your Captain Idaho, right? Get that all straightened out and looking good. If you manage to do all of that, if you totally, I own FSO, I got it. I understand this class backwards and forwards, and you're done with Captain Idaho, my personal recommendation, watch next lecture, the video lecture for Thursday. The reason being, we post the lectures online from previous classes, so you can watch them in advance. And what's nice about that is you can kind of listen and watch a little bit, get a gist of what we're doing and what we're gonna do. So when you get to class, you're actually prepared and you can just start banging away at this stuff. So if you need a little extra help, a little extra time, you feel like you're struggling with something, you know, hey, watch the lecture before we do it. It's gonna make more sense when we do it. And if you were in the lecture now and you're like, wow, you know what? I'm not so sure I got all of that. Watch the previous lecture. You can see them. We post them. Watch them again and again. Play, play, rewind as much as you want. But what I would say is if you're watching the lectures in my digital class, see if you can take notes to them while you're watching it, because, you know, videos, it's hard to stay focused. And if you're writing, you can't really kind of doze off, and you're gonna need that information, and it's a real drag to kind of scroll through and try to find the exact little piece of information you need. So if you're taking notes while you're watching it, that's only gonna help you get right to what you need. And I think that makes a big difference, because you and I both know that nobody has enough time to just go scrubbing through stuff for hours to find the exact thing they need. So great idea to take notes while you're watching. And that's just going to lead to more success. I know I take notes when I'm watching videos, and it makes a huge difference because I actually retain significantly more information by that process. And it's amazing because you won't think you've learned more or remembered more, but as soon as you look at your notes, it comes back like a train. Oh yeah, that's how that works. Versus a video where you're like, what the heck was he even talking about 20 minutes ago? Probably polygons. Does that make sense? Today, a little bit. I dabbled with polygons today. So again, that's my personal advice on how to go about that. I think it's one of the most successful means of trying to study and or learn from video. All right, so any questions about what we talked about today? Okay, because what I'm going to do is open the floor up for whatever, because we went through everything we needed to talk about today. You guys know what your assignment is. You know your next steps, so you should be prepared when you get to lab. Incidentally, your lab is in Full Sail 4B. It immediately follows lecture. You're in room 130, so you're going to just go right over there from here. And incidentally, in terms of my local class, you guys will never be late to lab. So if we're talking and we end up going a little bit late and we end up going late to lab, that's fine. They know that. Lecture is really important. You need to get all the information to be successful over there. So if we happen to be a little late over there, no worries, it's totally cool. What you shouldn't do is go right from lecture out for pizza and then show up at lab. You know, that's not gonna work. But we are flexible on your arrival time there based on departure from here. Make sense? Okay, thank you for playing. All right, any questions, or are you guys pretty good? How about my digital buddies? You guys got anything for me?
We're all over the place. We're planning dinner together. Some guys walking from Wisconsin.
Wisconsin will be a long walk.
I mentioned I was cooking dinner and they're all coming.
Everybody's hungry. Me too. I'm starving. I ate a sandwich, but that was a long time ago. All righty, guys. Well, thank you very much. I hope you learned a lot and had a lot of fun. You're getting a good idea of what we're headed for with this class. I will see you all again on Thursday. Thursday will be all of us together, same time, same place. But remember, Saturday is going to be digital only, and it will be at an earlier time, so you actually have some day to get some work done. But for now, you're good. So thank you very much. Head over to your lab. And again, that begins right at 5, I believe. Yep, right at 5 o'clock over there. And for my digital friends, Brian will be up at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So if you want to go over this stuff with him, that's when he's around. And if you check, there's a whole section called help. And that's where you get the schedule for when the help is available, where the help is available, how to get the help, how to spell help, all that stuff under help. So just look for it in the big red button. So don't be afraid to click that. But you have to have Google Chrome installed. That's got to be your browser to use the help button. So make sure you do that. All righty. Catch all you guys on Thursday. Thank you very much. Have fun, enjoy, and I will see you in the lab. What's that? I will be in the lab today. I will.